This is question 4 from the Core Concepts class book. Quite a long and tricky question in places. What will help you in this case is, in your notes you might have tables that look like this, where you might have type of transport and then, for example, gradient. Does it need a protein? Does it need energy? And you've got the types of transport like diffusion, facilitated diffusion, active transport, and maybe osmosis. So hoping that you've kind of learned gradient, diffusion, is high to low, low to high, osmosis, high to low, water potential. Protein, no, yes, yes. And for our purposes we're not worried about proteins for osmosis. Energy for diffusion, no. Still diffusion, no. Active transport, yes. Osmosis, no. So it's kind of type of diffusion. So this information here will serve you well during all kind of transport questions. So here we're just given a sort of simple situation of, here's a membrane, and how do some of these things get across the membrane. We have got oxygen, and that can get across. So it's saying oxygen can get across here, and it says also water can get across, and solutes such as sodium can get across. So it's telling us that all of these can get across this membrane. So how do they get across? 4 marks there. 4 marks. How are we going to get 4 marks? Well, you can imagine we might get 2 marks for talking about oxygen, and 2 marks for talking about sodium. So we can't just say the name of the process, we're going to need to give another bit of information. So oxygen will just diffuse across that membrane. So oxygen diffusion. And what happens to it? Well, it can pass through that phospholipid bilayer. So through the phospholipid bilayer. Sodium, well, sodium, there's 2 kind of possibilities that we could be thinking of. We could be thinking of facilitated diffusion or active transport, because sodium cannot pass through that layer of fat in the phospholipid. It doesn't dissolve in fat, it's polar molecule, so it can't get through that phospholipid bilayer. You would either need to go through a channel protein with a hydrophilic lining, or some sort of carrier protein in active transport. It does say that these membranes, the gills, are permeable, so it means that the ions can freely transport across. So in that case, if they're freely going across, it's not active transport because that would be against a gradient. These are going to go with the gradient, so it's got to be facilitated diffusion. Facilitated diffusion. And now we need to say how. Well, not through the phospholipid layer, but through the channel protein. So through a channel protein. So 4 separate points there. Then we are given some data, and we have got iron composition in the fish and iron in the water outside, and we've got 2 examples of 2 different fish. So we then look at what does iron composition actually mean. It means how much solute we've got, so how much stuff we've got dissolved in the water. And we notice that for this seawater fish, then the seawater itself has got lots of ions in, very salty, more than the fish. And in the freshwater fish, the carp, it lives in kind of a lake. You know, you could drink the water in a lake if you want, or a stream. It's not got many ions in compared to the actual fish itself. You can then talk about water potentials in relation to these, and then suggest which way things might move. So we are just now talking about the carp. We're not going to mention the flounder at all, because it says carp producing large volumes of dilute urine. Well, what's going to happen to this carp? It's telling us over here that the gills are permeable to water and solutes. So water and solutes might move across. Well, let's take water. What might water do? Well, we've got higher higher water potential there. The highest is 0, so this is higher water potential, and this is lower water potential. So 4 marks. How are we going to get 4 marks from this? Well, let's say what we've got in our table. So the water has less ions than the carp. And so we can now convert that into water potential. Water has a higher water potential. So the water, or the habitat, just to make it clear there, there's a higher water potential. And so water will go from the higher to the lower water potential. So water moves from higher water potential to lower water potential. So water's going into this carp. So water's going into this carp. So now the carp, the cells are going to expand, burst probably, not explode as some answers we've seen. But the carp takes in water. So water moves in, and we better mention the process by osmosis. That usually gets a mark. And then we need to say, well, okay, the carp needs to get rid of this water, so that explains the large volumes of urine. So carp needs to get rid of large volume of urine to prevent osmotic lysis. That's just a posh way of saying bursting cells. And we could also talk about the ions maintain the iron composition, because it doesn't want to get rid of all of its iron. So not many ions in the urine as needs to maintain iron composition. But I'll be tempted to keep talking about the water.